On a Sunday, during the church service, the organist plays the organ as the choir sings the hymn. The pastor walks in, greets a couple of members in the congregation, and goes to stand on the altar. He starts the sermon by first greeting everyone seated in the congregation and tells them that now, more than ever, it's time to focus their charity on those closest to them, to those right outside their door. He says the enemies of justice attack at every turn and asks how they fight back. He says they may be tempted to lash out, to meet fire, with everything at their fingertips. Temptation has never been harder to resist, which includes the beckoning call of anger and wrath. He quotes verse 13 from the Bible and says, "When tempted, one should not say, 'God is tempting me,' for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire. When desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, gives birth to fatality." He tells them not to be deceived. Every good and perfect gift comes from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He pauses for a bit and says the Lord will protect them all. He starts to have a nervous breakdown, but apologizes to the congregation and tells them that he's feeling under the weather. He then tells them to stand up for the next hymn. The service comes to an end, and the pastor greets the congregation members by the entrance. A little boy comes up to him and says, "God bless you, Pastor." He sits in his office and prays to God for guidance. He stops and asks himself, what if he loses it? It's all he's wanted, all he known. What if he was wrong? What if this is no longer his destiny? He asks himself. Jesus gave his life for the sins of humans. What has humanity done to thank him? Why did God send his Son for humans? For if God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment. He says he is lost and asks God to tell him what to do. As he continues to pray, a man comes in and tells him that there was an accident outside and that Andy Hammond is no more. Then, the man rings the church bell. 3 years later, an old man walks outside to throw the trash in the bin and curses at the raccoon. Suddenly, he hears a noise and runs back inside his store. Roy asks if he's all right. He says he thinks there's a bear outside, and he almost wets his pants. Roy asks if he's sure it isn't Bigfoot, and he says he should go and investigate by himself. Then, he gives him a broom and tells him to make himself useful because his break is over. 4 friends sit at a table in the diner. Laura says they are going to love the cottage because it's really relaxing and remote, and they also have a boat. Her brother, Tim, tells her that it's the middle of winter and he can't even use a boat. Besides, Mom and Dad always have the keys, and they don't trust them. But she says she has the keys. He thinks that's so unfair, and his mom never lets him bring anybody. Laura tells him that it's probably because they don't want them on their furniture. He says that's probably right. Amy claims she heard he works at the sports store. He tells her that he runs the sports store. She asks if he owns it, but he says no, that he manages it, and it's good pay and benefits. Plus, the staff are super cool. He says he just found out that one of his employees is blowing everybody at work. 3 other friends are in the diner, sitting at another table. Sam drops his phone on the table and throws a card at Mitch. Sean asks him if everything is all right, and he says no, that he's a little pissed off at both of them. Because of them, he is missing Pedro's big bash. He says everyone's going to be there, and he knows they both don't care, but someone of his social standing happens to care. Sean says they should just take it easy and have some fun, but he claims as long as he's stuck with both of them, he's not going to be having any fun, and he doesn't have enough coke to deal with it. On that note, he's going to find some more. Laura tells Tim that Amy's a great songwriter. She has a beautiful voice, and she's great with a guitar. Tim thinks that's awesome, and they should hear it. Amy says no. He tells her that he would love to hear it, but she says she'd rather drink cyanide. Manny laughs and says she can do it quietly, but she refuses, saying it's not so much singing as it is screaming, so being quiet is not really an option. Mitch tells Sam that they have a board meeting on Monday, and they have to get ready for it. Sam says they have all weekend to prepare for it, so he should chill. Mitch thinks that's the point, that they only have the weekend to prepare for it. Sean tells Mitch that they know what's on the line, and it'll be good for him to have some fun, drink, and he can listen to his Creed, Hoobastank, or whatever he wants. Mitch thinks that sounds like fun, just a couple of guys listening to some Creed and Hoobastank. Tim asks Amy how many tattoos she has. She says she's got a bunch while trying to cover them. He then asks what the one on her hand is, and she says it's a tree, giving a reference to Mother Nature. He asks what the problem is with Mother Nature. She gets all moody and just sends a hurricane. Amy just ignores him. Manny says he's going to get the bill, but Tim tells him not to worry, that he'll pay. The man always has to pay. Manny sarcastically says he forgot that he has ovaries as he goes over the counter to pay, passing by Mitch and his buddies. Mitch tells Sam and Sean that they can have a couple of drinks, then buckle down and get back to work. Sam tells them that his main man Philly just texted that he's in town and can drop by a little bit of blow. Sean asks Sam if that's going to make him happy, and he says yes. It's definitely going to make him very happy. He would get to be himself, and Mitch would be able to get back to work, and everyone will be happy for a change. Mitch asks if they know who's there now. He tells them that upset Mitch is in the house. They didn't want to meet him, but now they get to meet him, and he's putting his foot down. He says there would be absolutely no Philly. He doesn't want to know him. He says if they want Coke, he will get them Coca-Cola. Sam taps Sean and tells him that the guy over the counter, who happens to be Tim, has been listening to their conversation, and he doesn't appreciate it. He takes the pen from Mitch and throws it at Tim. Mitch curses at Sam and tells him that's not nice. Tim walks up to Sam and asks him why he threw a pen at him. Mitch tries to apologize on behalf of Sam, but calls Sam a limp rod. Tim tells Mitch not to let Sam talk to him like that. Sam, at this point, who is already pissed off, gets up, walks towards Tim, and says to Mitch that he didn't know Mitch's boyfriend would be joining them, and he should watch his mouth. Manny tries to get up to stop them, but before he can, a man, Kurt, walks up to Tim and Sam. The man asks Tim and Sam what the problem is. He says all troubles in the world, and they want to bring violence to complete strangers over something minor. He hopes they are both bigger than this. He tells them to look around, and that they look more foolish than strong. He tells them that they all have journeys to make, and suggests that they don't postpone their friends' travels longer than they have already. He then tells Tim that he will handle the bill, making him leave, and so does Sam. Kurt then goes back to meet Carl and asks him if it's ready. Carl says it's just getting in now. When Mitch gets back to the table, Laura asks why he always has to get into trouble, and Tim says he had to help the little guy who was being... Amy tells him he wasn't protecting anyone. He was just showing off. Laura asks if they can go now, and they all agree. Tim tells Manny that he doesn't think he's getting laid, and for once, Manny thinks he's right. Roy brings Kurt hot teas in 3 different flasks. Kurt appreciates it and says, may it bring them comfort in the night ahead. They should enjoy this night. It will be long and cold, but the truth will lead them to salvation. He then leaves with Carl. Al walks up to Roy and calls Kurt a weirdo. 3 men and a lady sit in a metal shed drinking when they hear a loud noise on the roof. They ask if it's the dog, but the lady says it's not. She tied him down. They hear the dog bark and pull on the rope from the ground to the top of the roof. Something drops to the floor, and one of them goes to check what it is. When he gets to it, a monster comes from outside and slashes his feet with its claw. The monster starts to butcher all of them, one by one. The lady tries to escape, but is dragged back into the shed and assassinated. Sitting in the car, Carl says he trusts Pastor Kurt. But how are they going to fight the monster? What can the 3 of them do? Kurt reminds Carl that he's not a pastor anymore and tells him that they will have hallowed ground on their side. The battle is already in their favor, and Mr. Renfield will drive them to the ground that they must make hallowed, where they will make their stand. He asks if Carl feels that the monster has started hunting again and says, may God have mercy on the victims' souls. On the road to the cottage, Manny tells Amy and Tim to have a piece of the pie. It is really good, and they should get some on the way back home. Laura tries to start up a conversation and tells Amy that the guy who broke up the fight was nice. Manny says he sounded like a priest, but Laura says he's too young to be a priest, and Manny tells her that they can be young and still be priests. They contemplate his age. Maybe he was 45 or 36, but Tim says he looks like 50. Tim tells Manny that just because he looks at saggy balls all day doesn't make him an expert on age. Manny claims that's not what he does in medical school and asks if that's what Tim's doc does to him. As they are laughing about it, Laura shouts at Tim to watch out, and he swerves the car on the road, avoiding what he thinks is an animal. The car slows down, and Tim says the car is out of gas. He asks Laura if she filled up the tank, and she claims she did. Tim blames Sam for it. Simultaneously, Sam and his pals in the car also run out of gas. Sam says Sean should go outside and check on the car, but Sean says he's the car guy and that Sam should go check. Sam shouts at Mitch to go outside and check the car, but Sean tells him to calm down and lay off Mitch. After a while, they make Sam go check it, so he goes outside and inspects under the car. Back inside the car, Mitch tells Sean that he knew Sam was a pain in the butt in the office, but he asks if he's going to be like this all weekend. Sean tells him to stop being a dad, and reminds him that the point of the retreat is for them to relax. He tells Mitch that Sam is a really nice guy, but he can't see that if he's always nitpicking him. He explains that even though Sam has his flaws, they go way back, and Sam has really helped him a lot. Mitch points out that Sam does a lot of coke and gets in a lot of fights, asking how he has ever helped. Sean narrates that back when he was a social worker and quit, times were hard, and Sam helped him out and even got him his current job. Even though his ego and drag him down, Sam still really tries to help. Sam gets back in the car and tells them that someone cut the fuel line. He blames Tim back at the diner. Amy asks if there's a gas station around, and Manny says there might be. He and Laura would go get it even though Amy and Tim didn't agree to that. As they leave, Amy also gets out of the car and tells Laura not to leave her with Tim, but Laura says she'll be back soon. Tim picks up a book from Amy's bag to read, but quickly returns it before she enters the car. Laura and Manny head out to get gas for the car. Kurt and Carl arrive at the shed where the monster was, but they are too late. It has already butchered everyone there. Sean says their cabin is only 5 meters away and they should just walk there, but Sam claims he's not walking on a rural road in the middle of winter. Mitch asks if they have any signal, as he doesn't. They check their phones and see that they also don't have signal. Sam asks what they're going to do, and Sean tells them to relax and that they can figure it out. Sam points out they're in a broken down car in the middle of nowhere, but at least he has his 2 best friends, so everything is going to be fine. Sean corrects that it's one best friend, and Mitch reminds Sam that he doesn't like him. Sam adds that there's one more person he doesn't like, and if he ever sees Tim again, he's going to butcher him. Mitch says they don't even know if he was the one who did it, but Sam tells him to shut up. Mitch tells him to go to hell. Sean tells both of them to quit their dumb squabble and goes outside to pee in the snow. As he pees, he sees something crawling in the bushes. Kurt and Carl set up a table, which they'll use to confront the monster. Kurt tells Carl that back when he was a minister, he suffered a crisis of faith. He had a breakdown during a sermon, and a few days later, a member visited him. He confided in the member, who warned him that it's dangerous for a holy man to turn his back on his faith, as it could make him a target for dark forces. He was told tales of a wild hunt, that if a transgressor is on the highway at night, he could become a victim of the ghost hunter. Kurt knows that his crisis of faith is what allowed for the monster to be known, an ancient being known as a druid, to enter the world, which is why he has to be the one to send it back. Tim asks Amy if she wants to play a game to pass the time, which she agrees to, but she loses interest when the game turns out to be about him. Sam and Mitch are waiting for Sean in the car when they see something outside. As they turn on the headlights, they notice it's Sean with blood all over him and his guts in his hands. As they run out to help, they hear the monster sound and both flee. Laura and Manny get to a house where they see a man and ask him if there's a gas station around, but he says they're not open at this time. He offers them some gas that he has and asks how they met. Manny tells him they met in med school, and the man hands him the gas, telling him that he'll be inside if he needs anything. As they are about to leave, Laura shows Manny a shed and tells him that they should both go there to have a little fun. At first he is reluctant, but he agrees. Amy and Tim are waiting in the car, and she tries to start up a conversation by asking Tim what Laura was like as a kid. He tells her that she always read comic books, and She-Hulk was her favorite. Tim asks about her siblings, and she tells him she has a younger sister and brother. They talk about their siblings to while away time. Carl pours salt around the table, while Kurt prays to God for help. As he prays, Renfield walks out on them and drives away. Sam finally finds a place to hide from the monster, and as he locks the door, Mitch also runs to the door and begs Sam to open it, but Sam refuses, saying he doesn't know what's out there, and continues sniffing the... Mitch bangs on the door, making him spill the coke on the floor. As he shouts and threatens to beat him, Mitch runs to find another place to hide. Back at the house where Manny got the gas, they hear a knock on the door, and Bill's wife rudely tells him to go answer it. Manny and Laura get to the shed and start taking off their clothes. Bill goes outside the house to check on them, but can't find them. He then turns when he hears a sound. The monster takes him down and drags him into the bushes. Manny and Laura are in the shed, passionately kissing as Laura takes off her shirt and bra, while Manny also takes off his shirt. Bill's wife hears the door open and goes to check it. She calls out to Bill, but doesn't get any answer. Then she picks up a rifle to go look for him outside. As she steps outside, she sees blood in the snow, along with a hand. She then cocks the rifle and aims it. Things are getting steamy with Laura and Manny in the shed. As Laura tries to take off Manny's pants, she feels something drop on her face. She opens her eyes to see what it is. She sees the monster and screams, making it jump on her, using its claws and fangs to tear through her skin, assassinating her. Manny runs back to the house and tries to call for help, but the phone has no signal. The monster enters the house, looking for him, so he hides behind a shelf, but as he looks up, he sees the monster. Kurt talks to Carl and asks what made him offer his services. Carl explains that he had a wife, Clara, who was sick. They had bought a new home to live in. A few weeks after they moved in, Clara started having nightmares and sleep paralysis. She heard whispers of someone called the Duke of Crows, and in the morning, she'd wake up with scratches all over her. The minister he talked to said there's no such thing as demons that haunt houses. One night Clara was very hysterical, but he urged her back to sleep. The next morning, he found her in the kitchen with cuts of crosses on her wrists. That was all 2 years ago. He couldn't go back to church, but remembered the sermons Kurt used to give. Carl blamed himself for what happened, but now he has rediscovered his purpose, and Clara's demise won't be in vain. Her sacrifice would save the world. They make a toast to Clara. Amy asks Tim if there's a blanket in the car. There isn't, so he offers her his jacket, saying he's always warm. Tim tries to make a move on her, but she stops him, saying it's not going to happen. He then asks why she came, and she says because Laura invited her. He tells her she's disgusting, and she replies, saying that coming from a 23-year-old girl who hasn't grown out of her high school phase. She tells him he really can't handle rejection, and he says there was no rejection. She was the only thing in the car, so he went for it, causing her to punch him in the face. He tells her to get out of the car, but she refuses, and they hear a noise coming from outside. Tim says it's a rattlesnake, but Amy thinks it's not, because it's the middle of winter. The monster scratches the body of the car and breaks the glass. It tries to grab Tim, but Amy uses pepper spray on it as they scream. Manny runs to get inside the car, and they ask him where Laura is, but he tells them that she's gone. He couldn't save her. Manny takes a look at Tim's injured leg, and they carry him out of the car. Carl asks Kurt if the druid is close, and he says yes, and there's only one thing missing. As he turns around, Kurt grabs him and uses a knife to cut his throat, using him as a blood. Amy, Tim, and Manny get to a shed where Manny starts to inspect his leg. Manny tells Amy to tell him how she got into singing to distract him, because he doesn't want to think about what happened. She tells him that she does music and works at a tattoo shop, and she's looking forward to opening her own shop. She asks if he always wanted to be a doctor. He says he wanted to be a professional free runner, which happens to be a real thing. He became a doctor because his dad is a lawyer. Manny finishes patching up Tim's leg, and Amy asks what they'll do now. They check the shed to see if there's anything they can use. The monster gets inside the shed and attacks Tim, ripping his guts out. Amy and Manny run outside, but hit Mitch on the way, knocking off his glasses. Amy mistakenly pepper sprays him, and he starts having an allergic reaction. But Manny helps him as they find another place to hide. They get to where Sam is hiding, but he still refuses to open the door. So Manny hits the door, pushing Sam to the ground so they can enter. Mitch can't breathe properly, so Manny performs a quick medical procedure by putting a small hole in his neck and inserts a small tube so he can breathe. Before they plan their next move, the monster gets to them and attacks Sam, assassinating him with one swing of its claws. It goes to attack Amy, but before it can, Renfield comes in and shoots a gun, scaring it away. He tries to help Amy up, but she tells him not to touch her. He introduces himself and says he's there to protect them and take them to safety. He tells them that he has friends preparing to fight the monster and tells them to follow him or stay there and see how far it gets them. He takes them to the shed where they meet Kurt, who invites them inside and offers them tea. Manny asks what really is going on, and Kurt tells him about the monster, a creature of instinct, hunger, pure animal impulse, otherwise entirely indestructible. He says the druid is a servant of the Duke of Crows. Manny doesn't believe him, thinking it will be dealt with by special animal control, but Amy tells him that it's not from nature. Kurt tells them that he summoned the druid there to assassinate it. Mitch goes outside the shed, and Manny asks Kurt if he's going to say a magic spell to make the monster go away, but he says the only spell he knows is the one to make it stay. The monster comes in and attacks Manny, clawing at his chest, and Kurt orders it to also attack and assassinate Mitch. Amy tries to run away, but Kurt grabs her and slams her on the table, then ties her down. He tells her that this act will give meaning to her miserable life. Kurt orders the monster to climb the table and have intercourse with her, but as it tries to take off her clothes, he sees a tattoo on her, and it falls off. Kurt says the tattoo was a sign used to ward off the druids, so he picks up a knife to cut it out. but Amy kicks him and unties herself. She picks up the knife and stabs Kurt, but he kicks her leg, dislocating her knee and making her fall down. She gets up to stab him again, and as she does, the monster screams in pain, and they both meet their demise. Amy cries out in pain, but Manny gets up and helps her put her knee back in place. He helps her get up, and they both walk out of the shed. Back at the diner, Al tells Roy that they made it through the shift without Bigfoot getting them. He tells Roy that he's not afraid of Bigfoot, and there are lots of other things to be scared of. Roy sarcastically tells him that he seems scared of bears. Al shares that when he was a kid, he found a rusty nail and put it in his air gun. He then went inside and told his auntie that he would shoot her, but she didn't listen, so he shot her. Roy doesn't understand, but Al explains that what he's trying to say is that people are the real monsters, not what they read in fairy tales. Renfield walks into the diner, and Al tells him that they're closed, but he just sits down and smiles at Al menacingly.